Morning, everybody. So Mark 5, 21 to 24 and 35 to 42. When Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. Then one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him, "My little daughter is dying. Please lay your hands on her so that she will be healed and live." So Jesus went with him. While Jesus was still speaking, some people came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. "Your daughter is dead," they said. "Why bother the teacher anymore?" Overhearing what they said, Jesus told him, "Don't be afraid, just believe." He did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw a commotion with people crying and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, "Why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep." But they laughed at him. After he put them all out, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, "Talitha kum," which means, "Little girl, get up." And immediately the girl got up and began to walk about. She was 12 years of age. At this, they were overcome with amazement.
Brilliant. Nash, God bless you. God speak to you and through you as you lead us now.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. We're going to look at the topic this morning, Daddy's Girl. There's an African proverb that says, "I am because we are, and if we are not, then I am not." Inherent in that statement is the notion that I can't be fully human unless I fully respect the humanity that you have. I think that this text is really helpful for us if we think about patriarchy and as one of the issues that we might want to look at in our society today. Sometimes one of the ways we can best address these things is very simple. Sometimes it really is about relationships and at home. And so I'm going to begin talking to you a little bit about this text of Jairus in the few minutes that we have. Most of us probably, if you were raised in the church, you might know the story of Jairus. He's a synagogue leader in Galilee, and he falls at the feet of Jesus repeatedly and begs him to heal his little girl. And the story pretty well, you know that Jesus is on his way to give her a blessing when another woman extends it that stops Jesus in his tracks. It delays him. Many of us have called her the woman with the blood issue. And so while they're en route, someone else gets blessed, and there's this delay. They're delayed again when people come running up to John. They say, "Don't bother the teacher. Your daughter is dead." And some translations actually say, "Dead is your daughter." We can relate to the story in a variety of ways. We too have asked Jesus to heal a symptom when disease has already killed something off in our lives. We too have come to Jesus and waited for a blessing, but it seems like eternity rushed forward to aid somebody else. Drought quickly descended on all of our hopes and our dreams. We too have thrown ourselves at the feet of the Almighty, only to have us tell us we're wasting precious time. But the story is more than this. This is a story about a dad and his little girl. Every man around us has had young girls look up to him for guidance and hope, even the biological father. There's your niece, your goddaughter, your best friend's daughter. Likewise, each of us has had a father or a daddy. And so we're going to explore, just for the few minutes that are remaining, the topic Daddy's Girl. This story reveals a man's deep love for his daughter. He couldn't help wondering where her mother was. Why didn't the mother go out and look for this miracle? It seems that mothers are often very closely associated with the miracles of the children in the Bible. But I think here, the intimacy of this relationship made me feel that there are some things that only a daddy can do for his little girl. And there's something about being daddy's girl. Daddies, no matter how old your daughter, whether she's biological or spiritual, if God has gifted you to nurture the next generation of women, every man he meets is compared to you. If you encourage her to actualize God's potential in her life, she will then fully embrace God's plan for her. If you're threatened by her and other women, then she will seek, even against her conscious desires, a relationship with that which negates her. You are proof that she can be vulnerable without being destroyed. You're the first man to reach and gently wipe her tears away. You're the first one to see her weaknesses and not use them against her. As we would say in the US, Daddy, you're the man. And in this text, we begin to realize that daddies are very, very special. Your birth certificate will ask, who is the father? It wants to know who the biological relationship is with. Where I come from, though, the community says, who's your daddy? And this could be an uncle, it could be an older brother, and it could be your father. But there's a notion of relationship. Father plants the seed, but daddy nurtures it. Father begins life, but daddy makes sure that life endures. Fathers are sometimes required, in my culture at least, to pay child support. A daddy will give you everything he has. Everyone has a father, and not everyone has a daddy. There are three things that are essential in this text that a daddy does to bring resurrection power to a dead daughter. The first thing is that daddy releases himself to God. Verse 22, you see that Jairus is weeping and falling at the feet of Jesus. And I think about how many men in our society stand tall and proud and unemotional before God, but there's death at their front door. I was not a daddy's girl. I had a good father, and he was a good provider. He was always there, but he seemed far away. He was the second oldest of 8 siblings, and he grew to become a very stern father and disciplinarian. He was a product of his time. How many of us wish that those fathers could have been loving, tender daddies? I think men in our culture are cheated when they're not allowed to become a daddy. Many of us have fathers whose love will bring them to Jesus, but they cannot fall before his feet. They lack that humility. They lack that urgency to be connected with us. And it's his plea, the plea of Jairus, that grabs our attention. And when daughters were treated as little more than a commodity, we often see them essentially thrown away. But here, this man is pleading for the life of his daughter. He says, put your hands on her that she may be well and live. And I think of that as, don't just heal the symptom, cure the disease. His love is so apparent. He doesn't want Jesus to just speak a word into her life. and he's not in denial about her state. When he says, put your hand on her that she may be well and live, it's this imperative and a directive. When a man loves his daughter, he doesn't want just any man to touch her. An inappropriate touch could get her killed. He honors and trusts God by allowing the express revelation of God in Jesus to touch his daughter. His statement is a statement of trust that God will not hurt or harm her. In falling before God, Daddy releases himself to God. He's an example of what a man of God should be. Because some things only a daddy can do for his little girl. The second thing is, Daddy's able to walk with God. We know that he walks with God and he's speaking, but he's also listening. She's diseased. There's a disease, and I'm thinking disease is something that eats away at what's healthy and vital. It attacks the good in your body or in your life. And if we look beyond physical disease, we get a wider application here. A diseased child could be on the internet in secret but missing the next week. A diseased child could bottle up emotion and take weapons to school. A diseased child picks at other children, is angry and spiteful and angry with himself. We've all met and seen diseased children. And maybe disease has threatened your home at some time. In this text, however, when we see disease threatening the home, there's this daddy who seeks resurrection power. It can't be bought. It doesn't come with position. It came because he was walking with God in verse 24. And in walking with God, I imagine that he's sharing his troubles with the Almighty. I wasn't there, but I can see a father who mourns the pain of his child going through something. And say things like this: maybe if I had been more strict, Lord. Maybe if I'd spent more time with her, Lord. And maybe if I'd listened to her more, Lord. Maybe if I loved her more, said I loved her more. Maybe if I hadn't pushed her off on her mother so much. Every parent has these types of thoughts. See, he pours himself out in his conversation to Jesus, but then he listens to Jesus. Verse 36, Jesus tells him, believe. He's listening to Jesus. Can Daddy listen? Can he put God before himself and remember words such as Paul's, that nothing can separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus? Can Daddy say, like my ancestors would say, guide my feet, Lord, while I run this race? When we let God guide our walk, the walk is sweeter. Daddy must be able to walk with God. The result of walking with God is that his daughter also walks with God. If we look down again at verse 1, Jesus takes her by the hand and walks her to her parents. She walks with God because her daddy walks with God. How many women today cannot enjoy the church because God is seen to be this gigantic incarnate male who will treat them like their fathers did? But if Daddy walks with God and has his daughter walking with God, that tells me there are some things that he can do for his little girl. And there's something special about being Daddy's girl. The third and final point is that he has to be able to release her. He has to be able to trust that God will do what's best for her. When you release, you give God control. Verse 40 says that he reunited them with her. And what's interesting is that the crowd laughed at Jesus. Sometimes when we're following God, people don't believe what we believe. We don't really sense what God is telling us to do. And they laughed at him. And what does it say Jesus did? He put them out. And sometimes as you're following God, the crowd is going to get smaller. But that's okay. That's part of what it means to release your daughter, your will to God's will. Some things only a daddy can do for his little girl. I bring us back to the moment of I am because we are. And if we are not, then I am not. If we see this as an opportunity to embrace the full humanity of one another, then we see a way clear to becoming more inclusive, starting with how we treat each other in our own homes. Jesus had a relationship with his own daddy, and on the cross he cried out, "Daddy, Daddy, why have you forsaken me? Why have you turned against me?" But the Father loved him well. And in this sustaining love, Jesus gave everything he had so that we might have those fuller relationships here on earth. This is a message of restoration and healing. And perhaps you need relationships that are restored in your own life. We invite you to come, to meet with the leaders in the church, to meet with those that you know at the church. We invite you to seek that relationship anew through the love of Christ. And we point you back again to the example of a daddy who loved his little girl and the specialness of being daddy's girl. Amen.